Good evening, welcome to the November 8th, 2023 meeting of the CB11's Land Use, Landmarks and Planning Committee. My name is Jason Villanueva and I am the chair of the committee. This meeting is being called to order at 6:39 p.m. Tonight, we are joined by District Manager Angel Muscane, the staff liaison to our committee. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, we will cover a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand. The chat function should not be used. This is relevant to those that are on Zoom or remote. The chat function should not be used for CB11 questions or businesses about the agenda. All such remarks should be made on record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us of any technical difficulties that you may be having, or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you. When you can address who you are so that we can all know who is speaking. This goes well for board members and the public. Please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand in person and or through Zoom and wait to be recognized. We will now take attendance by roll call.
Committee members, when I call your name, please answer present. Adem Brija.
Present.
Devin is excused. Kenneth is excused. Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Jessica Morris.
Here.
Nelson Orama.
Present.
Beverly Pavon.
Present.
Vinny is excused. Jason Villanueva.
Present.
Candy. Yeah, one.
Excellent. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there's no objections, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. We'll move along. I am very tardy with minutes for both September and the month of October. I am committed to getting all three sets to you by December. The adoption of the minutes, as stated, we'll discuss next month. Announcements in the interest of time, each section has. That's an opening. Anybody have any announcements? Yes, Mr. Muscane.
So we have two, and we have DCP in the room to correct me if I make any mistakes. September 21st, the mayor released the details for City of Yes for Housing Opportunity proposal, which aims to increase the development of and access to affordable housing throughout New York City through changes to the city's zoning code. There's a full article in City Land that was hyperlinked in the agenda, which is available on the website. And then the second thing is today we received the referral package for City of Yes for Economic Development, which BCP will be presenting on tonight's agenda. Our deadline for submitting our responses is January 8th.
Excellent. This is a full 60-day cycle to review. Any other announcements? Excellent. Informational updates. I think it's the same as announcements first. All right, moving on forward to discussions and presentation is our first presenter here today for Property Scout.
Wilson is here, yeah.
Hi,
Hello.
If you would, I mean, Wilson possibly could do it as well. It's up to either one.
Maybe I'll just, to give a brief introduction, Wilson, thanks for joining. I, in another capacity, beyond community board and working in editorial, I co-chair the Planning and Urban Design Committee with AIA New York, where I came to meet Wilson and hear about his application, Property Scout. It's a zoning and land use application that he'll say more about it, but that aggregates all of the data sets, making all of that information accessible in one place. And I think it was a month or two ago, Beth, you asked if there was a way to understand what's kind of in play right now as far as DOB permits and that sort of thing. And the short answer was no, but the real answer is yes, actually, in an interesting kind of way. So in engaging with Wilson, I thought, well, it would be a really interesting opportunity to make a community board who's had a lot of experience with rezoning and is in a place where development is something of a pressure that is well understood as you know, part of the landscape here with all of the public investment and long overdue. So thought that it may be a good opportunity to see about bringing access to an opportunity, you know, a tool like this to a public entity like a community board. So Wilson is going to just share a little bit about the tool, and maybe you can give a more in-depth description about the tool, Wilson, for members of the committee and our district manager as well. George James, who's our land use consultant, is also zooming in and is very knowledgeable and an incredible resource, but I'm sure we'll be interested to see a little bit of what you've developed and kind of what it does, and then, you know, I don't know if there's opportunity or time to ask questions or have a discussion about it. Whether this is something that would be useful to know about or to leverage or to use or to inquire with as a tool. But thank you for joining us, Wilson.
Great. Thanks for having me, Jessica. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Jessica, maybe I turn over my screen. Is that okay?
I think so. Yeah, you have the power.
Okay, cool. So I'll share my screen, and as I'm just kind of sharing, I can start telling you guys about the product. And just so I have an idea of time, I should try to end in 15 minutes. Is that roughly?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So I'll end a little bit after.
Presentation, 5-minute Q&A.
What's that?
10-minute presentation, 5 minutes Q&A.
Okay, cool. I'll make it quick. So yes, Property Scout is a land use and zoning application. We have essentially linked the zoning resolution to each lot in the city, so you can do an analysis for any property in New York. And this is all based on zoning straight out of the zoning resolution. So whenever you see a reg here, you can click the link and see it in the zoning resolution. For example, you guys just had a rezoning in East Harlem. I forget what year it was, but I know it was pretty recent. So the special purpose district, East Harlem, right here. And if we click one of these lots, then you're going to have regulations showing the East Harlem regulations. This is that 138 section in the zoning resolution. So you can get an idea of kind of the buildings that could go on the site. And then you also have a map, which is going to be, I think, very helpful to people that aren't as tech savvy with just visualizing the type of development. So you can click 3D Sightline and you can see in 3D what is allowed and what's built. So you can see in the bottom, the height is maxed out, the red the red is maxed out, and the blue means there is envelope for them to build up. Not necessarily do they have the floor area to do that, but they could technically if they acquired air rights or whatnot. So that is the zoning analysis. You can do massings. I don't think that would be useful. Maybe it would be for a community board to, if there's a new development or land got traded or something, you can come in and you can quickly do a massing to see what could go there to give you guys an idea. So that's one part of the site. And then the other part, I mean, there's tons of property data within each property, you know, such as ACRIS data, air rights data. If there's a air rights document like a ZELDA, zoning lot development agreement, that's all going to show up in the air rights tab here. If there's a regulatory agreement for HPD, you can also look at all of the ZD1s in any district or area. So I can click this ZD1 tab, I can see a list, or I could view all of these on the map. And that's kind of where I was just before. So we were talking, I think Beth, I don't know if she's there, but she was asking about the pipeline and new development, right? So this is the city records that we have here. All of these records are basically indicative of future development. If you wanted to kind of quickly see, let's get rid of this radius and let's just go to community board 111. Is that right? 111. Does somebody have a question?
No, you're right.
Yeah, so in the system, 11 is we're community board 11, but the 1 stands for Manhattan.
Oh, right, yeah. So I'm speaking through code because that's how we see it in the database. But yeah, so all these are 3D plans that have been filed. You can click any of them and you can see them in 3D on the DOB. So we've collected all of this, cleaned it up. So this is what is going to go here. That's the ZD1s, but there's all kinds of other records. We can click new buildings, for example. We can click demolitions. We can click development site sales. So you have a very powerful consolidated data set of city records, right? Condo filings, HPD, affordable housing. Like if you're curious how the affordable housing units that are getting built in the community district, how that's coming along, we can just click that and we can just see all of the HPD filings. So instead of going to 15 different city websites that were built, like a long time ago, you can come here and quickly, analyze, the macro of, the total units, what's permitted, ownership data, everything. Air rights, I was saying too, that's another. And then we also have, so that's our record search. So you can search at the record level and you can view it on the map, or you can also search at the property level and view properties. So as we know with the city of Yes, the sliver law for contextual districts is going to be probably replaced, or they're going to allow quality housing buildings, right, to build up over the restricted sliver law height. So I was looking at EHC and I think it's a lot of it, Community Board 11, outside of the, let's see here, Community District 11. And if we look at the zoning districts and the special purpose districts, there's a lot of R72 zoning, right? So this is all R72, this yellow, the green is the EHC, similar to Zola, as you guys probably know. So R72 would have a sliver law restriction on a lot of these lots, right? So if we went to properties and then we just looked at the sliver law, you click sliver law yes. So this is what's going to happen to a lot of these properties. They're going to be allowed to build up higher if they have been restricted in height. So we could click that. We could click, development, property type, either vacant land or underbuilt properties, come into development potential. And let's say properties that are 50% built, maybe have a larger lot, 5,000 square foot lot. And instantly you're going to start seeing, I guess there's not a lot of 5,000 square foot lots. So that's, if you guys are afraid of development, and that's probably good. 2,500 square foot lot. But this is just vacant, right? So Normally, something like this here, this building here in East 11th Street, East 111th, or vacant land, they would be restricted in height. But with the City of Yes proposal, that's going to change. So super helpful having this, data that can help you guys kind of understand what's coming. Also with these new changes. Another change in the City of Yes that's coming is height factor buildings. I believe what's they're proposing is to allow. So if it's too technical, then I'll try to, I guess, make it a little dumbed down. I guess so. There's two types of building types in New York City. Really, it's quality housing and height factor. Height factor buildings can build up very high in exchange for giving more open space, right? So quality housing buildings can't build up as high, but they're allowed more floor area generally, okay? Now with the City of Yes proposal, it's going to allow some of that unused floor area on these height factor buildings to be used as quality housing buildings, right? So what you could see is some of the, towers in a park get a building on that lot. That's my understanding so far. So again,
sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
One of the ways of using the tool that I found really interesting in the context of East Harlem was just really simple, being able to access ownership information and having the ability to kind of cross-reference owners' portfolios, essentially, through that aggregated data set where if there's a vacant building, or you go to that owner and you see they have 3 other buildings that are similar condition, that's something that's really simple to find here. And then the other thing that I thought was really interesting, I don't know if you can show, but the development potential and the air rights overlay relative to aggregating opportunity to build up, especially with the elevated transit and the both the 6th line and the future Q along 2nd Avenue, where those catchments I believe overlap relative to being able to get a bonus.
Right. Transit. You mean the transit bonus, like the 20% bonus?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So well, first the ownership data. So this is all the new buildings here, and you can quickly see who these people are. You can sort this, right? So if you wanted to sort by the total built or permitted square feet, you could just sort that and get the largest projects first, and then you can go and look at the owner data and see who these are, right? So you're going to see some probably owners that you recognize, and or you can just click any of these lots, like as Jessica was saying, like if you're like, all right, who owns this, or you can go to owners, and usually we will deliver the owner, right, their phone numbers and a list of everything else that they own. So if I click this name, I've never clicked this one, but sometimes you get, yeah, so this person owns quite a few buildings. The Doe Fund, maybe it's a nonprofit, I don't know. But yeah, so we have an owner matrix. There's 3 main things that we have with the zoning resolution and the zoning data. We have the new development pipeline data of land use records, new buildings, and then we have the air rights data, right? If there's any air rights been filed. Right here, you can also, as I was saying before, you can search that, on the map in the city record search. So if you wanted to just,
well, maybe can you just talk about the blue map that was just on the left, sorry, on the right? A moment ago you had highlighted a property, and yeah, if you're looking at a property, Yeah.
There we
The
go.
map on the left shows you, relative to, how underbuilt the neighboring properties are, and, if there are, air rights documents associated with them, orange. Indicates that there is, and then,
Correct. So you'll see what's remaining. And I want to make very clear that like we spent 3.5 years getting regulations out of the zoning resolution. The floor area is super accurate. It's going to be more accurate than any other source. And that underpins everything in the app. So that's like the foundation, right? So whenever you see a floor area remaining or any kind of FAR value, that's coming straight out of the zoning resolution, and it's super accurate. So this block actually looks like it does have quite a bit of potential. You can see there's these lots that are vacant, some other lots, a couple of them have air rights, regulatory HPD agreements. But yeah, you can click any block and get that map. And then there's that transit bonus easement that Jessica was talking about. So we drew out all of the underground subway stations. We didn't do it by hand, but we ran some code and did a lot of code to get these. And so we can tell you how far you are from that subway and if there's any easements or bonuses that are applicable.
Mm.
So yeah, I should probably open it up for questions because I think I'm coming to an end here, right?
Yes, sir.
so, I think the question would be, is this something that has a use to a community board? It's a tool built for the development community, essentially, and front ends all of their work. Is there, have you had asked about?
I'll ask the two questions. Question number, because the questions are for the presenter, not for us. The question to you is, we were told that you offer this software free to the board.
Sorry, say it again.
Will you be offering this software free to the board?
So what I spoke to my partner about is that we'd like to set you guys up with like a trial, like a free trial. And then, we're going to give you guys like a very reduced rate. Depending on, it really depends on how many people want to use it, right?
And then, all right, that's a great to the point, right? And then the second question, well, you pretty much answered it for the first one.
So I have a trial right now, so
Yeah.
that Wilson was kind enough to extend to me to noodle around with and to get an understanding of what it can do. So, if there's interest in.
Oh, there's the second question. Do you provide training?
Yes.
On the software?
Yes. Like we are very proactive in doing 2-week check-ins. If you ever have a question, then hop on Zoom and show you. But what I'd love to do is I would just love to give anybody in this room, an extended free trial to just test it out and see if it's something you'd like to use. And then my guess is you guys will probably just get like 1 or 2 licenses if you do decide to move forward. And as I said, we're going to give you guys, we want to help in the development process and, give you guys a much reduced rate, probably like a student license kind of rate or something like that.
Excellent, thank you. Nilsa?
Thank you for that, and thank you for your presentation. In terms of our audience, if there's anyone who would like to access this software, I went on your website and said request access, and so I'm curious. You're saying about giving us potentially a reduced rate. Could you give us a ballpark figure for those who are not part of the community board, but of the public that might be interested in accessing this website? What would be the range?
Yeah, so it's anywhere from $2.99 to $4.99 per month is what the commercial, licenses are paying.
Okay, thank you.
And that depends also on how many users. So if there's more users, then it comes way down. But again, as I was saying, you guys aren't going to be paying that for sure.
Thank you so much.
My understanding would be that, as a tool for the board to address issues that, constituents would bring or that we have relative to, things going on in the neighborhood, that we would have the ability to do some research to support, resolutions or points of action, or just to further inform what our positions are, using, this. And so if there are questions out there in the neighborhood among constituents, right, to bring them to the board office and together figure out how, if we can address them, and if this is a tool in our toolkit to be able to help support that increase in understanding. And furthermore, my sense is that the way that a community board would use a tool like this is very different than the way a development team would use a tool like this. And I think that that's really interesting and something that has incredible value for, Jason had brought up the warehousing conditions along Third Avenue, to be able to do a little bit of analysis on who and where and how much and what that looks like on a map, to quantify it, to then be able to say to HPD or other officials, look what's happening here in this place that was rezoned with incredible potential around it. How, it's a little bit of proof when you can use the tool. So, I don't know if there are limitations on what boards can do and have an interest in doing. If it's not something we would use or have a use for, then it doesn't make sense to have an expense associated with it at all. But in
They
the
offer, just
trial.
to your point, they offer the trial, they offer training. We're not making any, it's presentation, it's informational. And Wilson, we appreciate the information. I do see interest, and we'll take it from there. It's something that we could review with the executive as well as with other board members, to correlate whether or not this is a tool that would like to be used. The person I think of the most is Mr. James and or Mr. Muscane when it comes to this stuff, but that's my uneducated response on that. So I think the tool's awesome. Wilson, I think we should be in conversation about the trials, at least for the committee members that are here. I'm interested in probably a more in-depth training session. I see the use of it, particularly for zoning and new development. So thank you.
Yeah, and you guys, community board that we've actually met with, that there's a couple others that have recently expressed interest. But I think it would be really helpful to the city if there was some kind of partnership that we could form that, other community boards could also, this could be like a very useful tool. And and also there's probably pieces of data that you guys might want that we don't have that we could add also. So for example, like at the AIA today, Jessica, one of your colleagues, was asking about getting building energy data into the app. And so that's something we're going to add soon also. So I think it could be very fruitful in also shaping maybe some kind of more like nonprofit type product for community boards.
Nelson?
Just one quick question. Have you pitched your presentation to the Manhattan Borough President's Office at all to gauge interest where maybe they can support some licensing or some student rate
Access.
Thank you. I lost my word. Access for the community boards, maybe for the period until, let's say, June of this year, or because at the very least, each community board, maybe in Manhattan, should maybe have one that the district manager can access, even if he never uses it, and then it can be like the chair of land use, let's say, if they're looking for information. Really only one licensed person using it, or two, not trying to just have everyone work off that one license, but I think that there would be value in making a presentation to the Manhattan Borough President's Office, because that's 12 community boards. And if you can get the 12 community boards interested in this, I think it would help open up all the other community boards as well.
Yeah, that's, I would love that. I mean, if anyone has a line to the Manhattan Community Board president, I would love to, connect with him and try to flush something out that could be very useful. So,
right.
yeah, should
Well,
I, is that allowed, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're democratic.
I know how sometimes there's, it's like, you gotta be very conscientious about writing messages at these.
Presenting, I would just only tell you, do some research on the open source data tool that's sponsored by the city. Because they may have conversations of like what you do differently versus them. And they're a public entity that houses a lot of this data from Acris and et cetera. But like I said, I think it's a further conversation to be had. It's not, this is the first presentation that you provided us, and I appreciate the information. I think the board appreciates it, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you, Wilson. Appreciate you.
Stop my share here.
Thank you, Wilson. We'll follow up and be in touch.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
When they do the chair, the meeting of the chair, the Manhattan Borough President, do you have opportunity to recommend a person
Yeah.
for presentation?
Okay.
All right, so I'll speak to the chair. All right, thanks for the homework, Jessica.
Well, just a question of one
Of
concern.
course.
I mean, to sort of expose a vulnerable community to a tool that the development community uses. It's a little bit like when you pull the curtain back and Oz is standing there. I think it's the potential to have access to that as well. The challenge is then, what do you want to know and what do you do with what you find out? And I think that, it kind of requires action when you have that kind of access and knowledge. So it's here if we want it. To do what, I don't know. And Angel, I'd be curious to kind of pick your brain and understand what you think about how all of that information adds up, and George as well, as far as, is this something that has any value to the work that the board does, has done, or may do, and in concert with the public side. And this is the private side, the tools that the private side tries to make the publicly accessible information somehow easier to get to. So hopefully it's a good kind of concept.
Next presentation. Informational presentation from the Department of City and Planning, City of Yes for Economic Opportunity Proposal. Is Trevor amongst us?
Yes, and Matt
Yes.
Gutierrez, my
Present.
colleague, we have some handouts to
Thank you.
hopefully make this slightly less tedious.
Excellent, and you'll be sending this, I mean, I know.
Yeah, Angel already has it. I was
Oh,
wondering,
perfect.
Angel, do you think you can post it in the chat for the participants?
It'll be a part of the minutes, it's like habit to just say it, because sometimes we just don't. You guys are safe or send it. Not you personally.
Trying to get better at that.
Yeah. And you guys are actually, well, your stuff is all public anyway.
Yeah, no secrets here.
Google everything.
Where should I sit?
I'm about to give you the laptop.
gonna sit in front of the owl.
Make it larger.
So, following Angel's instruction, we really try to make this as specific as possible to CB11. I know last time with carbon neutrality, we were sort of speaking in generalities, and it was hard to sort of fully visualize how this might play out on the ground, so we're trying to do a little bit better here. Like I said before, we're joined by Matt. Matt's the liaison. Do you want to sit up here, Matt? Sure. For CB1, but he's- oh, yeah, we've got. We go more.
Thank you.
He's joining me here tonight as backup, and we've got Jose Trucios, Upper Manhattan team leader. On Zoom. And we're not the experts, of course, but we'll try to relay information and take questions back to the people who know. So without further ado.
And just for clarity, the people they're talking about are the authors. That's the
Yeah.
term that's used. Those that are interested in very cumbersome discussion, we have a process, 30 to 60 days. This is being shown to you. I prefer that you write your questions when it comes to this particular text amendment, because it is not necessarily just a land use action, it's changing law. So I prefer that those in the public, as well as those on the board, you write down your questions, we can ask them publicly, but I prefer that you submit them to the land use email and or district manager on record, so we can formally send that to DCB, who has been great in the past in responding.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Last time with carbon neutrality, we took all the questions right back to the authors and got answers right from the source. So we're looking forward to repeating that process.
Thank you, Joe.
Was there something you want to say if you have your hand raised?
No, it was me, but essentially, what Jason was echoing. You know, we really appreciate if you can send you reading questions as soon as possible. This text amendment, and Trevor is going to get into this. The referral period will expire in January 8th. So we have another meeting in December with you guys to potentially come back and answer these questions. And I believe there is another general board meeting where you also had the opportunity to vote before that day. So, carving enough time for us to ensure we answer all these questions. I think, the process that we did last time, where we incorporated questions from Community Board 9, 12, and 10 into the responses, was really helpful, just to give a whole general temperature check for the whole Upper Manhattan region. And we are aiming to do something similar, but it's really helpful if we get those questions in advance, and we'll be taking notes today as well.
Thank you, John.
Okay, so let's jump in. This will probably run 30 minutes. My apologies in advance if it drags at any time. So as you know, I'm sure, as you all well remember, we had carbon neutrality referred out earlier this year in the spring. That was the first of the 3 citywide text amendments under City of Yes. Now we're on to zoning for economic opportunity, and as the district manager mentioned earlier in this meeting, and as Wilson from Property Scout went into unexpectedly, zoning for housing opportunity will be coming out in 2024. It's a very, very meaty and exciting proposal. Not to say this one isn't, but we're sort of building up to that sequentially, I guess you might say. We've already discussed the referral period for this citywide text. Without being too rudimentary and what this entails, I just want to establish for the members of the general public who might be on how exactly zoning interacts with businesses in the city. I understand you're a small business owner in the neighborhood, right? So I'm looking forward to getting your insights. But zoning defines hundreds of uses of business type, sorts them into use groups, of which there are 16, and these are in turn regulated by zoning districts. So in this way, zoning districts dictate the kind of business activities that can be conducted in any given retail space, as well as the size of the business. New York can be a tough place to run a business. That probably goes without saying. And unfortunately, most of the time, zoning doesn't help the situation. The zoning resolution often precludes the siting of prospective businesses outright, or imposes a challenging set of rules such as preventing a bar from advertising the time live music will play, or setting a strict cap on the amount of floor area a bakery can devote to baking. That's 750 square feet, by the way. The overarching vision for this initiative is to make sure zoning works for the economy and not against it. The ZR, as you know, is dating from 1961, and it hasn't entirely kept pace with times as it relates to New York's evolving economy and retail landscape. So the goal of this text is to make the ZR simpler, more adaptable, and modern. We're going to be discussing 4 overarching goals tonight, which cover 18 distinct proposals. This text would apply to all 5 boroughs and all 59 community districts, but as I mentioned before tonight, we're really going to try to focus it on what it would mean for East Harlem, and that's why we have these applicability maps, and you can sort of thumb through it and see how the proposals break down district by zoning district. Okay. Jumped ahead a little too quickly. But as you can read here, the 4 goals are to make it easier for businesses to find space and grow by lifting zoning barriers, supporting emerging industries, also fostering vibrant neighborhoods by ensuring that businesses contribute to active, safe, and walkable streets. We're talking about streetscape regs and improvements in that category. And 4th, to create new tools to create opportunities for future and emerging business categories to grow. We want to begin with a look at existing conditions in East Harlem. There are about 53,000 jobs. I think Mount Sinai is the largest employer. So you can sort of see that reflected in the level of institutional employment. Also a lot of employment by the DOE, as you might expect. There's also a breakdown of retail storefronts by industry. Unfortunately, you can see on the left, East Harlem CB11's been hit pretty hard by the pandemic. It's 92% of pre-COVID jobs. That's a slower recovery than Manhattan, which has 96% of pre-COVID employment, and farther behind New York City, which is at 99%. The retail scene is slightly more promising. There's 15% retail vacancy, 300 vacant storefronts out of 1,990. That's slightly below Manhattan, still more than New York City as a whole, which is at 12%. A little hard to tease out in this map, but you can see clusters of retail vacancy on 125th, which I think has been a somewhat long-standing context in this neighborhood. Also clusters on Lexington, 3rd, 2nd. This data is pulled from Live XYZ. You can access their website for free and poke around and look at occupied storefronts and vacant storefronts. I can send the link around, and then you can really zoom in on where the actual vacancy is. So we just wanted to establish that context before leading into the next goal, which should hopefully maybe take some steps towards addressing this context of retail vacancy. These are the 6 proposals in the first goal. This is going to be the longest to get through, so I promise the whole presentation isn't going to go at this plodding pace. So proposal 1, lift time limits to reactivating vacant storefronts. In the zoning resolution, there's a section 5261. Well, sorry, first let me say, for non-conforming retail spaces, spaces that don't have a commercial overlay or aren't in a commercial district, these aren't generally allowed to reoccupy their space if they've been vacant for more than 2 years, since they're non-conforming. The ZR section 5261 removes this clock altogether, but it doesn't in some districts. High density districts, you're talking R8 through R10, and historic districts. The R8 through R10 is more applicable in East Harlem, and I have here an example from East Harlem. This dry cleaner is closed. You can actually see it here at the top. It's R8 district above 135th Street, sort of sandwiched between the Harlem River Drive and 5th Avenue. That's an R8 district. There's no commercial overlay. So this is a non-conforming storefront in a high density district that could theoretically not re-tenant if they don't find a new tenant in the next 2 years. You can see in green here the proposal to expand the provisions of 5261 to the R9, R8 districts throughout East Harlem. This map is a little bit hard to read because commercial overlays sort of cancel that out, but it's still sort of showing a little bit of green on this map, so I apologize if that's confusing. I'll try to get you one version. Proposal number 2. This concerns C1 and C2 overlays. As I'm sure you all know, these facilitate ground floor and sometimes second story retail and otherwise residential districts. These are widely mapped throughout East Harlem, as you can see in the handout. However, there are different use regulations concerning C1 and C2 overlays that often don't make sense. C1 overlays have a more restrictive range of uses compared to C2, despite the fact that they're oftentimes mapped right next to each other or right across the street. In this screenshot, this is 116th Street. I sort of displayed where the C2 overlay ends and the C1 overlay begins. You know, identical built context, but the business on the right could theoretically not attract the same tenants as the business on the left due to tighter use group restrictions. So this is the exact proposal. You can see the uses that aren't allowed currently in C1, but that are allowed in C2 districts. These include personal and business services, entertainment uses, wholesale establishments. I'm not totally sure what these actually translate to. Sometimes as far as the actual business, but the idea is to expand, make the uses consistent in C1 and C2 overlays, and that will open up these stores, some of which are vacant, to new types of tenants. You can see that C1 overlays are more widely mapped on Lexington and Madison, and C2s are more common on 3rd and 2nd. Not totally sure why, but I should note that DCP, for its part, doesn't even map C1 overlays anymore. It almost exclusively maps C2s just because it's more of a sensible range of uses. The second part of this proposal is to lift ground floor use restrictions on certain types of tenants. In C4, C5, East Harlem doesn't have C5, but in C4 and some special purpose districts, for whatever reason, certain types of uses are prohibited from occupying ground floor space, possibly due to the sense that these aren't like active enough uses, but that's really debatable. These include dance studios, other instructional facilities, and so this also contributes to vacancy by having this sort of arbitrary restriction. So that would allow any commercial use to occupy ground floor space. Moving on to more high density commercial districts, not the overlays. So for CB11, we're really talking about C4 and C6 districts, and those are the only commercial districts that are mapped in East Harlem. You can see there's also, similar to the C1s and C2s, there's not really a sensible mix of uses here. I thought I highlighted this, but really these last 2 rows in the box on the table at the left are the ones you want to be looking at. You can see uses that are allowed in C6 but not in C4. That includes personal and business services, custom manufacturing, wholesale establishment. That's going to collapse those uses and open up C4 districts to those types of uses. So you can see the C4 districts that's pretty widely mapped on 125th Street and 3rd Ave, and also covers the East River Plaza. I don't know if East River Plaza is actually gonna want that kind of tenant, but it was going to extend to it.
They should take whatever they can.
So expanding opportunities for small scale clean production, that's the 3rd proposal. The 1961 zoning resolution had pretty hard views of manufacturing uses, believed in strict regimentation of uses and, you know, Euclidean zoning separating that, but you know, it sort of conjures up like a Dickensian image of smokestacks and stuff like that. But the reality is that production has evolved considerably since then, and you have all sorts of boutique manufacturing operators that wouldn't necessarily be harmful to their neighborhoods. neighbors and are actually totally sensible uses to locate in commercial districts. These include breweries, ceramics, bakeries. I've got the picture from Hot Bread Kitchen and La Marqueta. Apparel making, 109 embroidery. That's another East Harlem business, is a good example. Garment production. So this proposal would allow these maker businesses to locate in East Harlem's commercial districts. These businesses would still be subject to environmental standards to ensure that they're not negatively impacting the neighborhoods. So in C1 and C2 overlays, we're talking about up to 5,000 square feet of space. In higher density, centrally located districts like the C4 and C6 districts around 125th Street and Lexington, this can mean up to 10,000 square feet. The bakery floor area cap, that's, they can only devote 750 square feet to actual production. That would also be like a restriction that be lifted. And to really get the full picture, you sort of have to dig into the ZR to see all the ins and outs, which I'm sure George has done. This one, we have a good case study because I'm sure you all remember 226 3rd Avenue, which is currently going through ULIP as we speak, touched on this. So unlike off-street parking regulations, which are static in the sense that they don't change with the occupancy of the building, loading docks requirements are different because they change based on the current use or current tenant occupying a building. So a certain change in occupancy might require for additional loading docks in an existing building, even if they're not strictly necessary or if the building can't physically accommodate them. As you can imagine, this can be an incredibly onerous requirement, especially for an aging commercial building. So this would allow for a greater range of tenant occupancy in older commercial buildings, which predate the requirement. I bring up 226 3rd Avenue just because I think it's all fresh in this committee's mind. This is a building that was completed, I think, and they wanted to change occupancy to life science uses. And that requirement would have made them, well, that change in use would have required them to add new loading berths, which they didn't want to do because they didn't think it was necessary. And they were probably right about that. So they had to receive a special permit for that. So just highlighting that since it's fresh in minds. Proposal 5 is enabling commercial activity on upper floors. Angela, could you correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think East Harlem Corridors already does this to some extent.
That's a George part.
That's a George. Maybe
It does. It does.
It does.
East Harlem, yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't totally revolutionary in East Harlem, but in the rest of the city, it is. Today's zoning allows for many buildings to have a mix of residential commercial uses, but zoning sometimes restricts businesses on upper floors. This limits options for new buildings to host both residences and businesses, and for older buildings to adapt over time. Interestingly, you can have a doctor's office on the second floor of a commercial overlay in a residential district, but not other types of uses. So you can see here how the proposal would play out in different districts. Right now in C1 and C2 overlays, commercials only allowed below residential. This would allow it to be on the same floor as residential, bearing in mind that there would be strict separation between the residential and the commercial components. They wouldn't be able to access each other on the floor. There'd be a wall dividing them and they'd have to use a separate entrance. The C4 and C6, like on 125th Street in Lexington, you could see on the same level with the same, barrier sort of extending, and then even above residential, we're talking maybe about rooftop bars and that sort of thing here. And then I also want to highlight any potentially noisy uses must add further separation of materials to attenuate excessive sound. Proposal 6 involves simplifying and modernizing the way businesses are classified in zoning. Because the zoning resolution is old, it has a lot of obsolete use classifications like typewriter repair, cell phone repair shops. But it doesn't have language for newer types of businesses. like cell phone repair shops, that's our current one. So this makes it hard for businesses to know sometimes where they can locate. So the idea is to modernize and simplify the terms we use in zoning to classify businesses with the standard industry classification system that's used by the federal government. I forget what that's called, like the NICS, I think. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So that was goal one. So goal two is to support growing industries. We're talking about urban agriculture, life sciences, nightlife, amusements, and home occupations. All these industries, by the way, are ones that encounter many zoning obstacles in today's zoning. So proposal 7, this one's relatively more simple, is clarify rules to permit indoor agriculture. This is a sort of use that's only permitted in manufacturing districts today. Again, this is something that's not totally kept apace with evolving technology like hydroponic indoor agriculture. We think the GCP thinks this is an appropriate and viable use for some commercial districts. I mean, food can be grown closer to communities. I actually have an example. This is Harlem Grown at the bottom right. This is a nonprofit operating more in central Harlem, but that does some hydroponic indoor agriculture, more for youth education, but still an example of that type of use. It would also allow businesses to process food or manufacture value-added food products indoors, such as turning vegetable into salsa, for instance, and that's an activity you could only conduct in an end zone. Proposal 8, which I think is also particularly relevant to East Harlem, concerns life sciences. This is an attractive and fast-growing industry that the city has been working really hard to cultivate for years, mainly spearheaded by EDC. We saw that with the Proton Center on 126th Street, which brought life science research and cutting-edge cancer treatment technology to East Harlem. Life science industries have largely been developing on east of 3rd Avenue in Manhattan. And so the New York Proton Center sort of marked a natural northern terminus for that emerging corridor. 226 3rd Avenue, again, is an example that there's interest in this industry and expanding into East Harlem, especially with institutions like Mount Sinai that they want to be close to. But the expansion of this industry has been difficult because these laboratories are often faced with confusing and outdated rules that slow the development of new facilities. So the zoning ZEO would make it clear that labs without potential for environmental hazard are appropriate in office settings. And we'd also expand where an existing special permit can be used so labs can be located in the future closer to research centers like hospitals and universities. I know there's some concerns about safety here, but labs are already one of the most highly regulated uses for safety. So these rules would apply to labs in new areas. Proposal 9. This is a meaty one. Support nightlife with common sense dancing and live entertainment rules. So restaurant and bars today face confusing regulations on whether they can host concerts, dancing, comedy shows, or open mic nights. We're simplifying the rules so that they're based on the size of the venue rather than the type of activity or entertainment, so that you'd see only small venues in neighborhood commercial corridors and larger venues in places like 125th Street. I've got 2 examples from the neighborhood here. This is Comedy in Harlem. This is located by East River Plaza. It's a C44 district. I think Comedy is technically considered use group 7, maybe. Georgia, no. I'm gonna keep asking. But that means they can't locate in C1 and C2 districts, whereas a bar with live music or even like a live music venue could. It's sort of a regulation that just doesn't make any sense. Amor Cubana on 3rd Avenue, this is a C25 overlay. They have live music, but businesses like that necessarily, while they can't have live music, they can't advertise show times and they can't charge covers at the door for the music. So the idea here is to clarify zoning to regulate nightlife based on capacity. So we're talking about 200 people. Sorry, let me read the script here because I want to make sure I get this right. So the proposal will shift regulations from type of entertainment to capacity. So whether an entertainment charges covers or host dancing will likewise be based on capacity. This means that live comedies, DJ, dancing, and ticket events would not be treated the same under zoning. The venues would have their occupancy limited to 200 people. That's roughly the size of a regular storefront. And that's based on standard building code practice when locating in their neighborhood commercial districts and commercial overlays. And you can see bigger venues of greater occupancy in the C4 and C6 districts, like 125th Street, which makes sense. And we know that bars and restaurants have the potential to create concerns in the community. DCP's been working closely with the Office of Nightlife and other city agencies to protect quality of life. DOB and FDNY will still keep regulating these uses. But it's a good example. It's a good proposal to sort of clarify confusing regulations for these businesses and help them to grow and to locate into new spaces. Similar industry that suffers from outdated terms is amusement businesses. This proposal would introduce a new definition for amusement and composite uses like virtual reality or children's arcades. Zoning often restricts these types of businesses to Coney Island or manufacturing districts. So we would simplify and modernize how zoning treats amusement and recreational activities to make clear these businesses are allowed indoors at a small scale on neighborhood streets and at a larger scale in your C4 and C6 districts. Home businesses also face a pretty tough set of regs. There's a strict floor area cap on how much of a residence can be devoted to a home business. That's 500 square feet currently, in addition to a floor area percentage cap of 25%. Also, there's a list of uses that are permitted as home businesses and those that aren't, like barbershops, which doesn't necessarily seem fair or correct. So this proposal would increase the floor area allowance to 49% for home occupations and would allow up to 3 employees to be associated with home business, the home-based business. It would also remove that arbitrary list of businesses that aren't permitted as a home business, but there would still be strict existing noise and environmental rules, signage limits, and restrictions on not selling items produced on site. Okay, so that was goal 2, more than halfway through. Goal 3 is to foster vibrant neighborhoods. This doesn't really concern businesses themselves, but more the streetscape, neighborhood context that helps foster vibrant commercial corridors. So in vast parts of this city, there are no rules whatsoever to prevent buildings from making streetscapes worse. Sorry, I should go. Proposal 12. This proposal's proposing a consistent baseline for commercial ground floor designs that are more pedestrian friendly and walkable areas like East Harlem. This means implementing consistent rules about transparency, ground floor design, street tree planting, and curb cut locations. Most of these are already in effect in East Harlem. And East Harlem Corridors has a really robust set of streetscape regulations. I have just some examples of streetscape conditions like theoretically improved on First Avenue where you see curb cuts. And compare that to Lexington Gardens too. This map, we're really only looking at tier B and tier C here. The streetscape framework has 3 tiers, they're cumulative. This would apply to the new developments, but also projects with a significant alteration that requires DOB sign off. You can see only tier B and tier C apply to CB11. It does touch the special districts, but that's more speaking towards the older special districts from the 70s that don't really have, didn't have got a consistent set of streetscape regs. East Harlem corridor, like I said before, is robust, so it's not really gonna be touching that. But you can also see how it extends to the other commercial overlays. Introducing new consistent streetscape regulations in avenues that might not have them currently, as well as the more high density C4 and C6 districts. Proposal 13 is to reduce conflicts between auto repair shops and pedestrians. I biked by this one on my way over here. I don't know how it got there. Auto repair businesses are usually treated as industrial businesses, and for that reason are usually located in manufacturing districts. That's how it's supposed to work, at least. But some exceptions allow certain types of auto repair to locate in C2 and C4 districts. This creates safety concerns for pedestrians and doesn't really contribute to a healthy pedestrian or streetscape environment. So we're proposing the consolidation of these uses into two categories, light and heavy vehicle repair and maintenance. Heavy vehicle maintenance, those are the ones that need to be licensed by the state DMV, and they would continue to be allowed in strictly industrial areas. Light vehicle repair can locate in C1 through C7, but only by BSA special permit. That's going to give communities more oversight on where this type of use is located. And there are a decent number of auto repair shops in East Harlem, as I'm sure you know. Proposal 14. I don't have a very firm handle on this one, so I'm going to read from the script. This is micro distribution. Zoning does not allow for delivery within buildings except in industrial areas, forcing these activities to occur on sidewalks and streets. We're proposing a new use called micro distribution facility that would allow these businesses to locate at a small scale in commercial areas. We should encourage deliveries to shift to non-truck transit and spur the creation of local hubs for sustainable deliveries. I know this might be conjuring up images of ghost stores. My understanding is that part of this proposal is there will still be transparency they'll introduce new transparency requirements for ghost stores so they can't paper up their storefront and sort of create an uninviting public realm. All right, the final goal, create new opportunities for local businesses to open. This creates new kinds of discretionary zoning tools to facilitate business expansion, including BSA permits, variances, CPC permits, and new zoning districts altogether. We'll be going into each one of these. Goal. I'm just have this here so we can reference this map later. Proposal 15, and I think this one's really exciting, and especially for East Harlem, is to facilitate local commercial space on residential campuses. As I'm sure you know, East Harlem has Manhattan's greatest concentration of NYCHA campuses. However, most of these campuses are zoned strictly residential, including easy access to shops, grocery stores, and other services. As you can see in this map here, this includes the Carver houses, Wilson, Wagner, and Lincoln campuses. They don't have commercial overlays. So basic access to goods and services isn't really an option here. You can see the C14 overlay in this photo. This is at the Taft houses and how it's facilitated this fine fare supermarket. That's a great residential amenity for residents. So this would create a CPC authorization to allow up to 15,000 square feet of commercial space in new or in existing or new construction on a large scale residential campus. Proposal 16 relates to corner stores. This is really meant for suburban contexts like Staten Island. It's not really relevant to East Harlem, so I'm just going to jump over this if you don't mind. Proposal 17, only one more after this. Rationalized waiver process for business adaptation and growth. So some uses like film studios that maybe as of right in the zoning district have unique bulk requirements that wouldn't be permitted under zoning, under the existing bulk envelope. like you can see in this photo, the high street wall that's required for a studio, soundstage use. So this proposal would create new streamlined pathways for these operators to gain bulk modifications. I know there used to be a film studio in East Harlem, maybe it will attract one back. Final proposal, create new kinds of zoning districts for the future. Sorry. So in some instances, it's the zoning districts themselves that are obsolete, and this is particularly true of the city's manufacturing districts. The 1961 ZR effectively banned the loft style of industrial buildings we see in places like Soho in favor of low slung buildings with low lot coverage and high parking requirements. In Manhattan particularly, this typology doesn't really make sense, especially now that we see increased interest from those engaged in maker type manufacturing for loft type spaces. So this proposal will create a range of new job intensive zoning districts at a range of densities and heights that expand the zoning toolkit for future rezonings. These are the 3 proposed new manufacturing districts. It's important to note that none of these are being mapped as a part of this proposal. However, you might want to refer to the manufacturing zoning map in the handout to see where the M districts are in East Harlem and consider how appropriate any of these districts might be in CB11's existing M zones. The ones I've seen so far generally favor like the low slung typology that you see on the left. That's M3A core industrial district. This is a district that for the first time restricts the FAR of all non-industrial uses while giving industrial space businesses room to grow. This is a critical tool for ensuring the preservation of industrial businesses, and it's one that's appropriate in areas that do not want to see transformation or in competition with industrial businesses. The second tool is a transition district, the M2A. This is designed to incentivize the creation. Do I hear like a train?
I'm sorry, I literally am having an issue outside of here.
Oh, sorry.
I apologize.
No worries. This is designed to incentivize the creation of new space that is guaranteed for industrial users, but also allowing a mix of business types to sort of cross-subsidize the creation of new space. This kind of a tool is sorely needed to renew derelict and outdated spaces, and we think it's appropriate in context where we want to balance preservation with a mix of business types. The third tool, sorry about this, I'm reading right from the script, is the M1A or growth districts. As I said before, today's M1 districts is in many ways obsolete, and I think that's the manufacturing district you mainly see. It doesn't actually say it's M1, but on Park Avenue, Upper Park Avenue, that's predominantly zoned manufacturing. In addition to other spaces, although I think a lot of these are owned by the city, like a bus depot, and things like that. So I don't know. I think only a small portion of these are privately owned, but still applicable in this instance. The M1 district lacks intermediate density options and has onerous yard and setback rules that make it impossible to build modern versions of the loft-like buildings we saw historically. This growth district is designed for industrial context where we want to take advantage of the job creation that can come from higher densities and a mix of business types. The last one, and we're done with CEO, is the C7 district. This is not an industrial planning tool, but a new type of commercial districts that borrows from the loft-like envelope of the growth district to enable a wide range of business types. This is the first kind of commercial district that does not allow residences, giving planners a tool for areas where we want to see significant job growth. So that concludes the 18 proposals. Just to quickly touch on the timeline. There's been a lot of outreach to date. It's been more than a year in the making, getting in front of as many audiences as possible. Got 60 days. And we're really looking forward to hearing CB11's insights. You guys had so many great comments on carbon neutrality, and I know we at DCP got a lot from that. So hoping we can keep that going for DO and for housing opportunity in 2024. Thanks for bearing with the long presentation.
Thank
We're
you.
happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Did we say we're sending questions to you?
Absolutely. Please definitely submit your questions in writing as I stated earlier. But I would make a reference, referral for you to present to economic development. And so that way we can coordinate with them. So I think a lot of the information you presented today would definitely be inspiring to that committee with some questions that we've had in the past. But outside of that, does anybody else have any questions? Jessica?
Have some comments. I think dialogue is productive. I know it's time, but a couple of concerns that I had that may turn into more formal questions after I have a chance to review the material in oral, verbal. When I have a chance to look at it, right, to understand it. I think there's a concern immediately in my mind about homogenization and a loss of character that can happen along.
Jessica, could you explain that to some of us, like about that term?
When everything starts to look the same, when you erase the nooks and crannies of the place, because things old goes away and new starts to appear everywhere. And Third Avenue is a big, First Avenue, Second Avenue, our avenues are at risk for that happening, is my understanding. So loss of character in some of these streetscape conformance tools is a kind of question mark that I have. And then with that, transitioning to new rules, kind of, how does that work? Like, who is enforcing this? And there's so much going on out there that shouldn't be going on, but that is, and it's vibrant, and it's excellent, and there's some of it that's not excellent. And who in places that are challenged economically, I would say East Harlem is, and I'm a part of that, but how, is it up to those who do the tenanting to make sure that there is use compliance? Or is that something that, and then things change when, tenants start to do business, the nature of business changes, and so compliance and enforcement, obviously a question relative to the transitioning to new rules. And then I think, given our high concentration, I think I would characterize this number, I don't know what number it is, but NYCHA infill, it sounds great as a commercial opportunity and sort of, but I know that is really contentious here in many ways. So, of course, there are opportunities for amenity, but there's also a huge risk for misunderstanding and a need to better understand what this means. I think across the board, because information helps to allay any sort of fears about what's not understood. So that will probably be something that would like to know more about what that could potentially produce or look like in various places throughout.
I will say NYCHA infill, that's part of housing opportunity. I know that.
Heads up, thanks.
So, but I take your point. This is more towards allowing for commercial spaces, small scale to develop on NYCHA campuses, but definitely going to get back to the authors with a response on that one, as well as enforcement. I'm really murky on enforcement and how that works.
Yeah.
My usual answer is to say DOB.
Who enforces it now?
Right?
Whoever enforces it
Yeah.
now, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's
I mean, you
gonna be
already
the
have
same,
rules, yeah.
same set of actors enforcing it. It should make enforcement
You may need
easier, in
more,
fact, because it's really basically simplifying use groups across the board. So that will, like, I mean, you saw in the nightlife slide, it's just a wild array of regs concerning these uses, and it makes it very difficult, not only for like the operators to know where to locate, but also for the enforcers to actually, sometimes they do sweeps of businesses, and if they see them advertising showtimes, they'll write tickets en masse, and that just happens periodically, like a prohibition era raid or something. So so like on the enforcement side too, I guess in theory it would make that a little bit more streamlined in practice.
Any question?
Jessica, then Beverly.
I'm gonna submit my full questions for longer answers, but just to give you a sense, I think overarchingly, it seems like it's you know, somewhat of a simplification of a lot of what is currently existing, and I think like some of my questions have to do with like nuance of things, like specific conditions in East Harlem, like we've heard in licenses and permits meetings that, you know, businesses that are operating, you know, ground floor restaurants are getting noise complaints from the floor just above them. So like when, you know, obviously like nightlife is something we desperately need in East Harlem. But you know, how does that get considered in like an older existing building with like next to zero acoustic qualities? So things like that. And then like, for example, public safety and transportation just reviewed and voted upon neighborhood loading zone expansions, and like, you know, how does that relate to the micro delivery conversations, and you know, just things that we're hearing and actively talking about in the community board, and you know, again, the nuance of how these things come to play in East Harlem specifically. I guess the biggest question is on proposal 12, you talked about businesses contributing to their surroundings. Like, are there any definitions of what contributing to the surroundings might include? I think, you know, we're talking about active retail corridors. So, I mean, in this photo on the bottom alone, you can see a curb cut with a car that's parked on the sidewalk, which is a practice that's, I assume, is being invited by the business. So
I know that.
That's my car.
Are you getting new speakers put in? I don't know if that's another.
And so like for new developments, there's other nice things that are required by streetscape regs, like planting a new tree for like X amount of frontage. On a street, transparency requirements, so the pedestrian can actually see into the building and go into it, like requiring ground floor uses in some instances, just to foster sort of lively corridor. So I think the intention is really to sort of create a uniform suite of streetscape regs that currently aren't systematically applied throughout the city. It's very case by case.
I will tell you that the number one concern, at least for me personally, with there not being enough businesses and their participation in the urban environment outside of their stores, is the maintenance, not the planting of trees. Like once the street trees are in, someone owning and caring about that tree enough to help it survive, and like trash generally. And just one more quick question, was the mapped in future rezoning for proposal 18, like, is there any further information about that?
Oh, no, I don't think I think that's for you to decide,
I got plenty.
where you'd like it. I mean, if there's like, an owner of an industrial space on Park Avenue, say, and they're like interested in one of these typologies, one of these districts that would allow them to create, you know, a considerably larger development than what's currently permitted. Like, as you can see now, it's a lot of one-story facilities, then they could theoretically do a private rezoning application with the department that would be referred to this board. And so that's now a set of tools that's at their disposal. But I don't know anything about the agency having any plans to actually map these.
No, I think there isn't like an appetite to like, just while these are still being, they want a lot of deliberation to be done before any community considers doing this. And so I think they wanted to increase, like DCP wants to increase the number of tools that can be used, but to not impose that a new tool immediately. To allow there to be like more robust conversation about it.
But DCP would like to see more of the old school loft make a comeback as opposed to and sorry, we will get like a full formal response, but on the micro distribution, this is obviously a huge thing right now in policy, and zoning is just one very small piece of the puzzle. DOT is looking at this very seriously, this whole question of last mile logistics, which is like fast evolving, and there's going to be a more comprehensive holistic approach that I don't really know much about, but I understand it's quite involved. So I will have the authors write a formal response to that. Thank you for this question.
And look into the enforcement questions, right? Because one thing I could say that I've seen in the last year, particularly like the DOT and the outdoor dining.
Yeah.
While that was loose, it was exactly that. The moment DOT got assigned as the enforcement agency, amazingly, all these diners started coming down. Because of the standardization being, implemented and practiced at home, so.
Yeah. I know we have a talking point on that somewhere. I think the answer is generally that 311 is still there for you, but this
We want an agency.
Mend NYC can step in.
Yeah,
On
and
this-
Men doesn't do anything.
They don't talk.
You have.
Beverly, and then we'll give Mr. Muscane. Is George hand up?
That's what I was thinking
Oh,
before.
okay.
But
Beverly.
I think you called Beth.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. My question is also regarding the outdoor dining. I know most of the zone amendments that's gonna be, that they're trying to implement will be towards buildings and stuff that's, regular and their spaces. Would any of these zoning text amendments be used towards those outdoor dining areas at all?
I don't think so, but Jose, you worked on the outdoor dining tech, so maybe you could speak to that.
Like for any type of businesses, where they can open up, it's not used for dining
I don't-
anymore, or,
this-
little spaces for another part of the shop where they can maybe manufacture or sell things from out of it, and it's not used for dining anymore.
No,
Oh, no, not outdoor dining.
It will stay always dining?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That would be a very interesting arrangement.
Like an extension from the building to the street. Yeah.
It's only gonna be dining.
Oh, thank you, okay.
Sit down. It's finally somebody owned the sidewalk instead of them just pointing at the city.
curbside.
Mr. James.
Yeah, this is great. I have tons of questions. I think I will submit a lot of them via writing, but I will also ask some now if the chair will permit me.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'd like to start with just a comment for the board, is to, this is the most ambitious zoning text amendment ever that I've ever seen. It's over 1,000 pages of zoning text. It's without question just incredibly ambitious. I heard people at DCP call it tremendous, and in fact it is. And it's a mixture. It's a mixture of really, I think, very needed things because, the use groups in zoning had, nobody's touched it in generations, and they're so outdated because it was so broken. No one wanted to try to fix it. And so now they're trying to fix it. And it is a tremendous effort, but here's the thing, is that there are a lot of things in here that I think DCP and the city can hear from communities on, like, for instance, if I may, neighborhood commercial districts. What are neighborhood commercial districts for? They're for you, people who live in the neighborhood. You want to be able to buy your groceries, go to the restaurant, get your, sundry items, the things that you need within easy walking distance of your home, right? So what this is going to do is, production facilities, things that used to be only allowed in manufacturing districts can go into your neighborhood commercial street. Trevor was talking about bakeries, but it's not just bakeries. We're talking about metal fabrication, tool and die, machinery production, furniture, clothing, pharmaceuticals. Like, all of these things could go into your neighborhood commercial street. And, the question is like, why would people in the neighborhood want that? Those are not uses that serve you. It's one of these things that I'm just extraordinarily puzzled that that these uses would be invited into neighborhood commercial where that's not the reason for neighborhood commercial. Neighborhood commercial is for the neighborhood. And and there's the other side of that is, so if you have all of these facilities which are not serving the neighborhood, what does that do to the vitality of your commercial streets? Right? You want people on the streets, you want people shopping, going from store to store. But what happens when they're all like, closed because they're not serving the people there? They're producing materials that are going to be shipped elsewhere. And specifically for this district, you voted in part to rezone Park Avenue because Park Avenue was full of these production type uses and it deadened the street. And along with the viaduct, created a kind of hostile pedestrian environment. Are we just inviting those types of uses to go into other commercial streets and to deaden those streets? It is, there's lots in here, and this is just one thing, right? There's so much more in here. Some of it is great, and other stuff like this, I just like, I think they got to hear from people from the community about why these uses should be going there. I could go on if you'd like.
George, I definitely would appreciate it in writing, so that way we can get the formality from DCP, because as
Absolutely.
Southern and the, I'm sorry, I'm familiar with these.
Okay.
DCP, these aren't the gentlemen that authored.
I get it, but I just, maybe Trevor could comment on like, why are we changing neighborhood commercial from neighborhood to something else?
Hardly equipped to respond to you. I learned my lesson from carbon neutrality. But I mean, I think that the idea is like the maker space, sort of these boutique
That's great.
manufacturing uses. I don't know specifically about metal fabrication. I don't know if an operator like that would be interested in a 5,000 square foot storefront, if that's feasible, like for the scale. So, but the impetus for this, as I'm sure is this persistent, intractable in some ways retail vacancy in East Harlem. I mean, 15, what was it, 19%?
15%. 15% is what you showed earlier.
It's been that, for decades. I was looking at SBS's neighborhood study, which was from, I don't know, 2012, and the numbers were the same. On 125th, it was 25%. So I think maybe there would be an interest in inviting a broader range of operators. I mean, not just manufacturers as you mentioned, but also we talked about the C1, C2 disparity, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about that because I've been wondering about that.
Yeah, I mean, the C1, C2 stuff is like fine, right? Nobody knows the difference between the C1 and C2 uses. Collapsing them is completely fine. It's the introduction of the M uses into the C zones that I think that, a lot more focus on that. And, I think, would a tool and die maker actually occupy that space? I don't know, but the idea is who it serves. Right? Does it serve the neighborhood or does it serve people from outside the neighborhood? And neighborhood commercial is important for the people in the neighborhood. So you can walk to where you need to go for your needs. And if you can't do that because it's being occupied by other uses, that's a problem. I think from a planning perspective, that seems like a problem, at least to me. It may not be for people on this board. Sorry, I'm a little editorializing here on that one, and I apologize for that. If I may, I'm going to ask another one. It's about the really dramatic increase in home occupations. And I don't know if everybody caught this. It's like you can now have 3 employees in your home occupation. There was a bunch of uses that were eliminated, like barbershops or beauty salons, kennels, right? So you can now have, a number of employees in your home taking up half of your home. And those people yes, you're not supposed to have objectionable uses, but what are objectionable effects? But what are objectionable effects? It lists like smells and vibrations, fine. But, who enforces that, right? Who enforces that? And then, what about the traffic in other jurisdictions, the way it works? is that if you have a home occupation, you know, a lot of things are allowed. But if you're generating traffic, people are coming in and out, that's not permitted. Because, you know, and especially in New York City where you have apartments, you know, you're going to have people coming in and out of the apartment, especially if you end up with, you know, 5 barbers working out of an apartment. I just, it has the potential to have real conflicts between residents living in the same building. I just wonder that, and I realize that this rule exists in places like Tribeca and in, you know, loft buildings that have been, you know, converted from commercial buildings, but those are different types of places. Right? They're in buildings that were designed for commercial use, and now are being occupied by residents. These are like, we're talking about changing this in regular multiple dwellings. It just seems, it seems to me to like be a potential to create a lot of conflict, especially if we're relying upon the Department of Buildings to enforce this. And you know, I'm not going to tell you something you don't know, but the Department of Buildings isn't all that great at enforcement.
DCP?
Do I have a talking point?
Yeah, I mean, I think, feedback that we have been getting a lot of recently, like, is, you know, I think enforcement is a major issue and concern with a lot of these proposals, and I think this is, I guess, you know, we'll certainly have to go back to the authors of these proposals and like underscore that as, you know, we can direct a lot of, like, our response to a lot of these sorts of questions could be DOB, but if that's not a satisfying answer to community members, that needs to be expressed explicitly for the department, and we'll get more information.
And Chair, if I may ask one more, and I know it's getting late.
Other people.
I'm sorry?
Last one.
Last one. Okay. The last one has to do with, you know, are we thinking about residential space when we're making these changes? So for instance, the way it currently works in most C1 and C2 districts is that you're allowed to have ground floor commercial and then residences above, right? And so now we want to change it so that we can have commercial on the second floor or commercial on the side or commercial above. So normally that second floor space is for residences because commercial isn't permitted on the second floor. However, you have the FAR to do commercial on the second floor in these districts. So will you be replacing apartments with second floor commercial space? And is that a good thing?
You know, sorry, go ahead, George.
And additionally, I would say is that, you know, we just heard DCP talk to us about rooftop space and how we need it for mechanicals and how we need it for solar panels. Do we really want commercial rooftops bars? And, you know, what is that going to do regarding noise to the neighbors? Because rooftop bars will be, you know, essentially outdoor uses that will be on the rooftop. And has that really been considered and thought about? And is that a good idea for these areas?
I would just want to say, and obviously we're going to get, you know, the big guns to give you for the full and informed answer, but from what I've heard internally at DCP, this question of, you know, commercial taking over space that would theoretically be for residences. You know, in today's economy, we just don't think there's any possibility of retail outcompeting residential uses. I mean, with the housing scarcity being what it is and the demand for housing being what it is, I think it's one of those conditions where the market logic will prevail and you won't see commercial uses taking away residences that are already there. I mean, CEO unlocks or expands the opportunities for commercial expansion. So you might, you know, it might seem as if housing is under threat in that lens, but I mean, once you see zoning for housing opportunity and just how robust that set of proposals is for you know, furthering affordable housing production and expansion in the city, you know, it's really DCP's top priority is housing. So I don't think they would ever conscionably endorse a regulation that would remove housing inventory.
And just real quick, I would definitely echo that, and I know that today we're talking about the economic opportunity proposals, but these will not be, these will not be put into effect in isolation. I know that we don't have all the details to share you quite yet with zoning or housing opportunity, but all of these, the three City of Yes initiatives will be happening in tandem with one another. So concerns about taking away residential dwelling units, I mean, this will be occurring alongside a super ambitious suite of proposals meant to increase housing production as well.
My point to the board is that currently you can't do it. And then in the future, you can do it. Meaning you can't have the second floor commercial in most of these districts in East Harlem. And in the future, you will be able to. And the FAR isn't going up. So that means that floor area would come from somewhere else. Will it happen? I have no idea. I really don't. Are they right saying that it's the market wouldn't allow that? All I will point out is that there's a lot of districts where there are grandfathered commercial uses that have been sitting vacant for well over 2 years, and they're still waiting to tenant them out to commercial use instead of converting it to its permitted residential use. It happens all the time, and in fact, we're going to be changing the zoning to make that permanent, so they never have to make that choice. So I'm just saying that there's plenty of examples of landlords keeping residentially zoned land off the market for use for commercial space. Lots of them. So I would challenge that as saying I'm not sure that that's supported by the facts.
Thank you, George. Adam, Nilsa, and then we're closing.
I was just gonna say, I think it's hard to really form a full opinion on this till we see the other aspects, because the way this can come off as to me is like give landlords in this neighborhood more opportunities to find tenants to rent stores to.
Yes.
That serves them, but doesn't necessarily serve this community. Like when I was surprised that we only have 15% commercial vacancy, like when you actually walk in this neighborhood compared to others, that 15-12 number, it doesn't feel, I don't feel it, but let's just say that's true. Then you go to the next part of that and say, well, what are these commercial places made up of? And we heard, right, like we desperately need nightlife and stuff. And I mean, I know there's parts of this that bring that in, but unless there's like other, like, that's why we gotta hear the other components of the housing and stuff. Because this alone isn't gonna encourage anybody to open more businesses in this neighborhood, as far as I could see, the businesses that we need. And that's the other challenge, I think, like, when we have such different needs in different communities, that we can just kind of put like a one size fits all, I get it's impossible to tailor them to each community. But we're sitting here tasked with worrying about this community being presented with something that's supposed to be applied to communities that are very different from ours. I remember, and I'll wrap up on this note, I remember when I went for my interviews last time to get reappointed, there were a couple of gentlemen who were like, I don't know, let's say CB1, CB2, and their like biggest concern was sanitation. And I'm like, I'm really happy for you that, you live in a community where that's your biggest concern, because, we'd love for that to be our biggest concern. So it's just, without seeing what's really because this isn't gonna bring the businesses, the housing component, all that, are you gonna rezone other blocks? Like we said, you rezone Third Avenue, nobody's really doing anything there. First Avenue, once you pass like 96th Street, it's like a dead zone. There's nothing. There's like 2 or 3 businesses. Second Avenue, when you go past 110th Street, there's nothing there. And I'm just wondering what's gonna be done to actually bring the businesses, the stores, because it contributes to so many things, public safety, whatever. It doesn't feel safe. And I've lived in this neighborhood. I've been here my whole life. I'm telling you, it's starting to not feel safe to walk certain blocks. Like you walk home from here, you're like, which way do I go? And I think with the right type of commercial stuff, that'll heal a lot, but I don't see it just with this.
Thank you. Nilsa.
Just a quick point or question. Your proposal 11 was enable entrepreneurship with modern rules for home-based businesses, and it was increased to 49% in 3 employees. That was mentioned. I'm curious, and I'm not looking for a long answer. They're already home-based businesses in this community. For example, you have like family daycares, which are already located within certain buildings. How do these rules affect the rules of the property managers, depending on the buildings that they run? For instance, NYCHA, right? NYCHA has its own set of rules that may not look to foster this kind of situation, even with changes. You have Mitchell Lamas that have allowed some home-based businesses in there, but may not feel comfortable all of a sudden their subsidized co-ops being used where you're increasing the capacity for employment there. So has there been any thought in terms of how this would work with pre-existing regulations, depending if it's private ownership, government ownership, those kind of things, and home-based businesses?
It's a fantastic question. And I don't think zoning really addresses different ownership structures, or like what a co-op board might permit. An owner to do, or what NYCHA might permit one of its residents to do. So I think that would really be context dependent on whatever, rules and regulations are in place in any given building.
Yeah, because of, because the next section is the housing opportunity, between them. So that might be something that could be addressed, because this can affect that portion depending on how it's written.
Yeah, I don't think there's any language in that, but it's so big, right? Definitely. Do you want to add anything on?
I mean, I don't have enough details, I'm gonna see as you, I think you bring up a really good point though. That's a type of question that I have not yet heard internally, discussions about, so maybe I'm not privy to them, but I think I'm happy you brought that up, because that's definitely worth.
Well, now you can get privy because we put it on record. We're gonna send the questions also formally to you gentlemen, and thank you for your presentation. As Jose already knows, we probably drafted some of them as we speak. So if you guys can start working towards getting us those answers, it'd be greatly appreciated. And I further recommend that you present the Economic Development Committee, because I definitely will be having a conversation with the chair there. And then obviously sooner or later with housing. Angel, anything good? Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation.
Jason, sorry, this is Jose. I just wanted to, quickly answer to a couple of things before you switch. I don't know if I have 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize. So, thankfully, Community District 11 intersects with two special districts. You had the 125th Special District and the East Harlem Corridors District. Two of them which already allow the distribution of the commercial and residential floor area. And, this is allowed as a right, is in the zoning resolution. And the fact that this is not something that's being done, it's another indication that it's responsive to the market, right? So you have 125th was done in 2008, and you don't see that many of people trying to utilize that distribution of the area with regards of residential and commercial with different access, but that is already established in this area in most of the entirety of East Harlem. And just to clarify that point, so not to say that this is not allowed now and it's now being allowed, it's just being expanded to perhaps capture another market, because we, not personally, but what we have been hearing for other people from developers to say is that there's site constraints, there is issues with the areas where they want to locate specifically for this, but this is already allowed. That's point one. The other question was for the streetscape regulations. I will invite the community members to look at the proposal. There is a specific section on the urban design characteristics divided by tier, and it's essentially expanding and borrowing for what works in a C1 to C2, applying to tier A to ensure that they have the same street there it is, and it talks about mostly about parking location, the drive-throughs and blank walls, the grading requirements to ensure that there's a harmonial, I think they call it pedestrian experience. And the other one that I know the answer of, which is I know I also came out when I was getting these briefings, is noise and locating next to your neighbors. I think somebody use an example when I was presenting a community board 12, it's like when they do a baby shower or anything that has nothing to do with home occupation or businesses, I still hear a lot of music. I still hear a lot of things, in order to ensure that your home business is well regulated and you get your license and everything that is needed for your home occupation. You will have to go through a process with DOB to ensure that you are, meeting these requirements of being a good neighbor. Those are already laid out in a zoning resolution. We're not changing that. We're changing the actual size of what is allowed to occupy in a dwelling unit, and by all percentage. So that is another change. I just wanted to, say that a lot of the things that we are discussing right now are things that are already happening in the neighborhood, and we are accommodating zoning to be more flexible, to incorporate those, because we're seeing that there is this conflict of having, being non-compliant, being non-conforming, and bringing zoning to the adaptability of this issue. Similar to all the texts that are coming along, right? So we did this for carbon neutrality. We're doing this hopefully also for other text amendments that are coming on board. For housing opportunity, it's going to be a little more different, because in that sense, the actual, genesis of that text amendment is to promote more housing. So you're talking about incentives, adding new things to the zoning resolution. And these two previous zoning text amendment, we are talking about fixing the zoning resolution to allow what already is in the streetscape, what is already happening, what we're seeing happening, to accommodate that into an outdated 1961 zoning resolution that doesn't reflect the actual, existing conditions of neighborhoods. So just to clarify that, and I don't know, I can answer more questions, but I definitely took some notes, and we'll get back to you with the specific reading answers, or hopefully pointing out to specific zoning sections to clarify any, issues.
Thank you, Jose. And gentlemen,
Well, we're going to review questions and responses at the December meeting, and then January 9th?
December we'll be voting.
We vote in December.
Same process we did for carbon.
Set up a similar document in the team folder in Google Drive to match the carbon neutrality insert.
We did the resolution, but right now I just need you guys to send me the Q&A.
Sorry, I
I
feel
know
like
George is already gonna send it. So we'll add on to that.
Thank you,
Thanks,
George.
Trevor.
Thank you, George.
I feel like I only come here when I'm foisting a citywide tax. Always great to talk to you guys.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank you.
having us.
Thank you.
See no objections, we adjourn the meeting at 8:31.
Anything else spend around the presentation that's.
Yes, the